If you think you know what betrayal feels like, trust me, you have no idea. My name is Sarah, and I'm about to tell you a story that will make you question everything you believe about love, friendship, and justice. 3 years ago, I discovered that the two people I trusted most in this world had been living a lie that destroyed everything I held dear. But here's the thing about being pushed to your absolute breaking point. Sometimes it's exactly what you need to discover just how powerful you really are. Before I tell you how I made them pay for what they did to me, let me paint you a picture of the life I thought I had. Because the higher you climb, the harder you fall. And honey, I was living on cloud 9, Act 1, the perfect life that wasn't. I met David when I was 25, fresh out of graduate school with my MBA, ready to conquer the corporate world. He was 30, established, charming in that effortless way that makes your heart skip a beat. He worked in real estate development. I was climbing the ladder at a marketing firm, and we seemed like the perfect power couple. Our first date was at this little Italian restaurant downtown. I remember wearing my lucky black dress, the one that made me feel invincible. David showed up with flowers, not roses, which would have been predictable, but sunflowers, because he said they reminded him of my smile. God, I was such a fool to fall for that line, but at the time it felt like poetry. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. The proposal was everything I'd dreamed of: sunset on the beach, my family hidden behind the dunes with a photographer, the ring so beautiful it took my breath away, a 2-carat princess-cut diamond that caught the light like captured starfire. I said yes before he even finished asking the question. The wedding was perfect. I mean, Pinterest board magazine worthy, perfect. We had it at the Riverside Country Club, 300 guests, a dress that cost more than most people's cars, and a reception that people still talk about. And standing right there next to me as my maid of honor was Jessica, my best friend since college, my sister in every way that mattered. Jessica and I met freshman year at State University. We were randomly assigned roommates, and from day one, we clicked. She was the yin to my yang, where I was driven and ambitious. She was creative and free-spirited. I was studying business. She was majoring in graphic design. I planned every detail of my life. She lived in the moment. We balanced each other perfectly. We shared everything. Late-night study sessions fueled by coffee and determination. Heartbreaks over boys who didn't deserve us. Dreams about the future we were going to build. When I landed my first job, she celebrated with me. When she struggled to find work after graduation, I helped her network until she found her place at a boutique design studio. After David and I got married, the three of us became inseparable. Jessica was the godmother to the children we didn't have yet, the sister I never had, the friend who knew all my secrets. David adored her aura, so I thought. He'd often joke that he got 2 best friends when he married me. Jessica would laugh and say she was just there for the free dinners and good wine. We had traditions. Sunday brunch at our house, where Jessica would show up with fresh bagels and stories about her latest dating disasters. Thursday night girls' dinners, where we'd try new restaurants and dissect our weeks. Holiday celebrations, where she'd stay in our guest room and we'd cook together like a family. For 3 years of marriage, this was our life. David and I bought our dream house, a colonial in the suburbs with 4 bedrooms, a chef's kitchen, and a backyard perfect for the family barbecues we hosted every summer. I was promoted to senior marketing director. David's business was booming, and Jessica had started freelancing, working from home, living just 15 minutes away from us. Everything was exactly as I'd planned it. We were talking about starting a family. David had even cleaned out one of the spare rooms and mentioned it would make a perfect nursery. I had stopped taking birth control. We were trying, actively trying, to create the life we dreamed about. I should have seen the signs. Looking back now, they were everywhere. Like breadcrumbs leading to the truth I was too blind to see. David started working later, a lot later. Real estate, he'd say, requires evening appointments with clients who work during the day. I understood my job demanded long hours too. But the later nights became overnight trips. Client dinners became weekend conferences. His phone, which used to sit carelessly on the counter while he showered, suddenly became glued to his hand. Jessica changed too, but so subtly I barely noticed at first. She started canceling our Thursday dinners more often. Too tired, she'd say, or working on a big project with a tight deadline. She seemed distracted during our Sunday brunches, always checking her phone, always somewhere else mentally. The three of us used to hang out together all the time. Suddenly Jessica would find excuses to leave early when David was around. Too much work, she'd claim, or an early morning the next day. When I suggested we all go out like old times, there was always a reason why it wouldn't work. I told myself I was imagining things. Marriage changes, friendships, right? People get busy, lives evolve. David was building his business, Jessica was building her career, and I was focused on climbing the corporate ladder while preparing for motherhood. It was natural that our dynamic would shift. But deep down, in that place where your intuition lives, I knew something was wrong. You know that feeling when the air in the room changes, when conversations stop just a beat too quickly when you enter, when the people you love most seem to be speaking in a language you don't understand. I pushed those feelings down. I made excuses. I convinced myself that love and trust meant giving people the benefit of the doubt. I thought that suspicious wives were insecure wives, and I was not going to be that woman. I was strong, confident, successful. Surely my husband wasn't cheating, and surely my best friend wasn't helping him do it. God, I was so naive. The last normal day of my life was a Thursday in October. I remember because it was unseasonably warm, and I'd worn a dress without a jacket to work. I came home excited to tell David about a promotion opportunity that had opened up a chance to lead an entire division. The kind of career leap that would set us up perfectly for starting our family. David wasn't home yet. Another late client meeting. I texted Jessica to see if she wanted to grab dinner and celebrate with me, but she didn't respond. I ordered Thai food, lit a candle and waited for my husband to come home so I could share my good news. He came home at 11:30, distracted and tired. When I told him about the promotion, he smiled and kissed my forehead and said all the right things, but his heart wasn't in it. I could tell. When you love someone for 5 years, you know when they're just going through the motions. That night, I lay in bed listening to David's breathing, feeling more alone than I'd felt since before I met him. I stared at the ceiling and wondered when we'd stopped being excited about each other's victories. When we'd started living parallel lives instead of a shared one. I had no idea that my entire world was about to come crashing down. The discovery happened on a Friday. Isn't it funny how the worst days of your life often start out so ordinary? I was supposed to work late, but a client meeting got cancelled, so I decided to surprise David with his favorite Chinese takeout and maybe salvage what felt like weeks of missed connections. I stopped by Golden Dragon, ordered enough food for 3 people because I had a crazy hope that maybe we could call Jessica and recreate one of our old spontaneous dinner parties. The ones where we laugh until our stomachs hurt and stay up too late talking about everything and nothing. Our house was in one of those neighborhoods where all the homes look similar, but each family has put their own stamp on theirs. Ours had the red front door I'd insisted on, the garden boxes David had built, and the wind chimes Jessica had given us as a housewarming gift. It was supposed to be our forever home, the place where we'd raise our children and grow old together. I pulled into our driveway and noticed a car I recognized but couldn't immediately place. A white Honda Civic with a small dent on the passenger side door. It looked familiar, but my brain couldn't quite connect the dots. I figured it belonged to one of David's clients, or maybe a contractor working on a neighboring house. I used my key to let myself in through the front door, calling out David's name as I kicked off my heels and set the takeout bags on the kitchen counter. The house felt different somehow, empty, but charged with an energy I couldn't identify. Music was playing softly from upstairs. Our bedroom. I climbed the stairs slowly, still calling David's name, thinking maybe he was in the shower and couldn't hear me. The music got clearer as I climbed. It was the playlist we'd made together for lazy Sunday mornings, full of acoustic guitars and soft vocals that we'd make love to when the world felt perfect. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I could see our bed through the crack, see movement, hear sounds that I recognized but couldn't immediately process. My brain refused to compute what my eyes were seeing. I pushed the door open. They were in our bed. My husband and my best friend, naked, tangled together, lost in each other in a way that spoke of familiarity, of comfort, of something that had been going on far longer than a moment of weakness. David's hands were in Jessica's hair I'd braided for her wedding years ago. Hair I'd held back when she was sick, hair I'd helped her curl for dozens of dates with other men. Jessica's legs were wrapped around David's waist, my husband, the man who'd promised to love and honor me until death do us part. They were so lost in each other that they didn't notice me at first. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, watching my entire life crumble in real time. Then Jessica opened her eyes and saw me. The sound she made was somewhere between a gasp and a scream. David turned, and when he saw me standing there, the expression on his face wasn't guilt or shame, it was annoyance, like I'd interrupted something important. Sarah, my name came out of his mouth like an accusation. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about love, about the people I trusted most in the world, collapsed in that single moment. Jessica scrambled to cover herself with our bedsheet sheets I'd picked out. Sheets we'd slept in as a married couple. Sheets that now felt contaminated by their betrayal. Sarah, I can explain, she started. But her voice was shaken, and we all knew there was no explanation that could make this okay. I finally found my voice, and when I spoke it came out as barely a whisper. How long? They looked at each other. In that look I saw everything I needed to know. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a one-time thing. This was a relationship. They had secret jokes, shared memories, a whole life together that existed in the shadows of my marriage. How long? I asked again, louder this time. David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I knew meant he was trying to figure out how to spin the situation in his favor. Sarah, this isn't how we wanted you to find out. How long? I screamed this time, and they both flinched. Jessica spoke first, her voice small and broken. 8 months, 8 months, I did the math in my head. 8 months ago I'd gotten food poisoning and Jessica had come over to take care of me while David was out of town. 8 months ago, David had started working later and traveling more. 8 months ago, Jessica had started being too busy for our regular girls' nights. 8 months of lies. 8 months of them laughing at how stupid I was. 8 months of them being together while I planned date nights with my husband and shopping trips with my best friend. Get out, I said. Jessica started crying, reaching for her clothes scattered around our bedroom floor. Sarah, please, let me explain. It just happened, and then we couldn't stop, and we never meant to hurt you. Get out of my house now. David was pulling on his boxers, and he had the audacity to look irritated with me. Sarah, be reasonable. We need to talk about this like adults. Like adults. I almost laughed at the irony. Adults don't screw their spouse's best friend in the marital bed. Adults don't lie and sneak around for 8 months. Adults don't betray the people who love them most. Get out. I screamed so loud that my throat hurt. They dressed quickly and awkwardly, bumping into each other and into furniture like teenagers caught by their parents. The domesticity of it, the way they moved around each other with practiced familiarity even in crisis, cut me deeper than their nakedness had. Jessica tried to approach me as they headed for the door. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I love you. You're my best friend, and I never wanted this to happen. I stepped away from her like she was contagious. You're not my friend. Friends don't do this to each other, but I am, she said, tears streaming down her face. I'll always be a friend. This doesn't change that. I looked at her, really looked at her hand for the first time in 10 years. I saw a stranger. This woman who knew all my secrets, who'd been part of every major moment of my adult life, who I'd trusted with everything. She was a stranger who'd been wearing my best friend's face. You were never my friend, I said quietly. A friend wouldn't have done this. After they left, I sat on my living room floor and cried until I thought I might die from the pain. I'd read about heartbreak, seen it in movies, comforted friends through it, but I'd never experienced anything like this. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was the complete destruction of everything I thought I knew about love and loyalty and trust. The Chinese food sat on the kitchen counter, growing cold, mocking me with its promise of a normal evening with my husband. I called in sick to work the next day, and the day after that. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't stop replaying every moment of our friendship and marriage, looking for signs I'd missed, clues that should have told me who these people really were. David came back the following Sunday. He let himself in like he still lived there, found me in our bedroom changing the sheets for the 3rd time that weekend. We need to talk, he said. I looked at him standing in the doorway of what used to be our sanctuary, and I felt nothing. Not love, not hate, just an empty space where my feelings used to be. Talk, I said. He sat on the edge of the bed I'd just finished making. I never meant for this to happen, but it did happen. For 8 months, it started out innocent. Jessica was going through a rough patch, and she needed someone to talk to. You were working so much, and she felt like she couldn't burden you with her problems. I almost laughed at his audacity. So this is my fault. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it started as friendship, and then it became something more. And before we knew it, we were in too deep to stop. You were in too deep to stop screwing my best friend in our bed. He winced. Sarah, I know you're hurt. Hurt doesn't begin to cover this. David, you destroyed our marriage. You destroyed my friendship. You've destroyed everything I believed about the people I loved. We can fix this, he said. We can go to counseling. I'll cut contact with Jessica. We can rebuild. I stared at him, amazed by his delusion. You think I would ever trust you again? You think I could ever look at you without seeing her wrapped around you in our bed? People make mistakes, Sarah. Marriage is about forgiveness. Mistakes are forgetting to pick up milk or missing an anniversary dinner. 8 months of screwing my best friend isn't a mistake, it's a choice. You made that choice every single day for 8 months. He was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, so what happens now? Now you move out and we get divorced. Sarah, please, get out of my house. David, and don't come back unless it's to get your things. After he left, I called a lawyer. Act 3. The spiral and the awakening. The next few months were the darkest of my life. I'd always been the strong one, the one with the plan, the one who could handle anything life threw at her. But losing your husband and your best friend in the same devastating moment, that kind of betrayal doesn't just break your heart, that breaks your fundamental understanding of who you are and how the world works. I moved through my days like a ghost. I went to work, sat in meetings, responded to emails, but I felt like I was watching my life from outside my body. My colleagues knew something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to explain that my entire existence had been revealed as a lie. The divorce proceedings started immediately. David fought me on everything: the house, the savings, even the furniture. The man who'd claimed he wanted to rebuild our marriage suddenly became vindictive and petty, as if I were the one who'd betrayed him. His lawyer painted me as the cold, workaholic wife who'd driven her husband into another woman's arms. They claimed I was never home, that I prioritized my career over my marriage, that David had been lonely and vulnerable when Jessica offered him comfort. The worst part was that some of it felt true. I had been working a lot. I had been focused on my career. I had taken our marriage for granted. assuming that love was enough to keep us strong while I chased promotions and achievements. But even in my darkest moments of self-doubt, I knew that none of that justified what they'd done to me. People in unhappy marriages talk to their spouses, go to counseling, or get divorced. They don't start secret relationships with their spouse's best friend and carry on for 8 months. Jessica tried to contact me constantly those first few weeks. Phone calls I didn't answer, texts I deleted without reading, emails that went straight to spam. She even showed up at my office one day, waiting in the lobby like a client, begging my assistant for just 5 minutes to explain. I had security escort her out. The mutual friends we'd shared didn't know how to handle the situation. Some chose sides, mostly mine, thankfully. Others tried to stay neutral, which felt like choosing them. A few suggested that maybe I was overreacting, that friendships and marriages could survive infidelity if everyone involved was committed to healing. Those people got cut out of my life faster than David and Jessica had. But the isolation was crushing. I'd built my entire social life around my marriage and my friendship with Jessica. Without them, I was adrift in a world that suddenly felt foreign and hostile. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Martinez, who specialized in betrayal trauma. She helped me understand that what I was experiencing wasn't just heartbreak, it was a form of PTSD. My entire reality had been shattered. My brain was struggling to process the cognitive dissonance between what I believed and what was actually true. You trusted them completely, Dr. Martinez explained during one of our sessions. That level of trust is beautiful, but also makes the betrayal exponentially more devastating. You didn't just lose a husband and a friend, you lost your faith in your own judgment. She was right. I second-guessed everything. Every decision I'd ever made, every person I'd ever trusted, every instinct I'd ever followed. If I could be so completely wrong about the two people closest to me, how could I trust myself about anything? The sleepless nights were the worst. I'd lie in bed in the guest room now because I could bed and bear to sleep in the bed where I'd found them and replay every moment of our relationships. I analyzed conversations, searched for hidden meanings, tortured myself with the realization that, while I'd been planning our future, they'd been planning how to steal it from me. I lost 15 pounds in 6 weeks. My clothes hung loose on my frame, and my reflection looked like a stranger, hollow-eyed and brittle, aged years in a matter of months. But somewhere around month 3, something shifted. I was sitting in Dr. Martinez's office, crying about how stupid I felt, when she asked me a question that changed everything. "Sarah, do you think you deserve this?" "What do you mean?" "Do you think you did something that justified their betrayal?" I'd been asking myself that question for months, but hearing it spoken aloud made me realize how insane it was. "No," I said quietly. "Louder, no," I said with more conviction. "I didn't deserve this, then why are you punishing yourself?" That night, for the first time since I'd caught them together, I felt something other than pain. I felt anger, clean, pure, righteous anger that burned away the fog of self-doubt and depression I'd been living in. I didn't deserve what they'd done to me. I'd been a good wife, a loyal friend, a decent human being who'd loved deeply and trusted completely. Their betrayal said everything about who they were and nothing about who I was. That anger became fuel. I threw myself into work with renewed focus, channeling my rage into productivity. The promotion I'd been excited to tell David about that last normal night became my obsession. I worked harder than I'd ever worked before, staying late, taking on additional projects, proving to myself and everyone else that I was not a victim to be pitied but a force to be reckoned with. Within 2 months, I got the promotion, then another one. My career, which had been stalled while I'd focused on being a wife, suddenly accelerated beyond my wildest dreams. I also started working out, not gentle yoga or casual walks, but intense, sweaty, exhausting workouts that left me too tired to think about David and Jessica. I hired a personal trainer who pushed me harder than I'd ever been pushed, and I discovered that physical strength translated into emotional strength. The woman who emerged from that darkness was not the same woman who discovered her husband in bed with her best friend. This woman was harder, smarter, more focused. This woman had learned that the only person you can truly rely on is yourself. But most importantly, this woman had a plan, because while I'd been rebuilding my life, David and Jessica had been living theirs. They'd moved in together into a house just 2 miles from the home David and I had shared. They were playing house, going to the same restaurants we'd all frequented together, socializing with our former friends as if they were the victims in this story. Jessica had even started wearing the necklace I'd given her for her birthday 2 years ago. A delicate gold chain with a small diamond pendant that I'd saved up for months to afford. She wore it in the photos that mutual friends would accidentally show me. Photos of her and David at parties and dinners, looking happy and in love. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd gotten away with it. They had no idea what was coming. Act 4. The plan and the perfect revenge. Revenge, real revenge, isn't about getting even. It's about justice. It's about making sure that people who think they can destroy others without consequences learn exactly how wrong they are. I spent months planning. Not in a crazy obsessive way, but with the same strategic thinking I used in my career. I analyzed their weaknesses, studied their patterns, and waited for the perfect opportunity. David's business was built on reputation and relationships. Real estate development in our city was a small, tight-knit community where trust and credibility were everything. His success depended on clients believing he was honest, reliable, and ethical. Jessica's freelance design business was growing, but it was still fragile. She depended on word-of-mouth referrals and repeat clients. Her reputation for professionalism and reliability was all she had. They'd destroyed my marriage and my friendship, but they'd been so focused on their own happiness that they'd forgotten I knew everything about their lives. I knew David's clients, his business practices, his financial situation. I knew Jessica's clients, her insecurities, her dreams. I knew them better than they knew themselves. The first phase of my plan was information gathering. I hired a private investigator not to catch them in their relationship, which was already public knowledge, but to document their lives in detail. Where they went, who they saw, how they spent their time and money. What I learned was fascinating and useful. David had been lying to more than just me. His business was in trouble, had been in trouble for months before our marriage imploded. He'd been taking risky investments, cutting corners on projects, and misleading clients about timelines and costs. The late nights and weekend trips that I'd assumed were about his affair were actually about putting out fires in his professional life. Jessica wasn't doing as well as she pretended either. She'd lost 2 major clients in the past year, and her freelance income was inconsistent at best. She was living beyond her means, trying to maintain a lifestyle she couldn't afford. They were both vulnerable. They were both hiding things, and they both had no idea that someone was watching them very carefully. The second phase was positioning. I started attending industry events, not David's real estate gatherings, but the broader business community functions where our professional circles sometimes overlapped. I rebuilt my network, made new connections, and carefully cultivated relationships with people who could be useful later. I also started volunteering for causes that mattered to me: women's shelters, mentorship programs for young professionals, domestic violence awareness groups. Not for revenge, those causes genuinely mattered to me, but because they connected me with influential people in our community who shared my values. Slowly, carefully, I began to position myself not as the bitter ex-wife, but as the successful businesswoman who'd overcome personal tragedy with grace and strength. People admired my resilience, my professionalism, my ability to rise above the drama and focus on building a better life. The third phase was patience. I waited and watched until the perfect moment presented itself. It came 8 months after the divorce was finalized. David landed the biggest contract of his career, a mixed-use development project worth $12 million. It was the kind of project that would set him up for life. The kind of success that would prove to everyone, including himself, that he'd made the right choices. The client was Morrison Holdings, a family-owned investment company that prided itself on traditional values and long-term partnerships. They chose contractors based not just on capability, but on character. They wanted to work with people who shared their principles. James Morrison, the company's CEO, was someone I'd met at a charity gala 3 months earlier. We'd had a brief conversation about business ethics and the importance of trust in professional relationships. He'd given me his card and mentioned that his company was always looking for marketing consultants who understood their values. I'd kept that card in my wallet, waiting for the right moment to use it. When I learned about David's contract with Morrison Holdings, I knew that moment had arrived. I called James Morrison and pitched him on a marketing strategy for the development project, not because I wanted to work with David, God knows. I never wanted to see him again, but because I wanted Morrison Holdings to know exactly who they were doing business with. I need to disclose something before we move forward, I told Morrison during our meeting. David Chen is my ex-husband. Morrison looked surprised but not concerned. I appreciate your transparency, Sarah. Does that create any conflicts for you professionally? Not at all, I said. I'm a professional, and I believe in separating personal and business relationships. But I did want you to know, because transparency is important to me. Morrison nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of integrity we value. Over the next month, I worked closely with Morrison Holdings on their marketing strategy. I was professional, creative, and effective. I delivered exactly what I'd promised and exceeded their expectations. I also made sure that James Morrison understood my values. During our conversations, I talked about the importance of trust in business relationships, the damage that dishonest partners could do to a company's reputation, and the need to thoroughly vet anyone you worked with. You can never be too careful, I told him one day. People will surprise you, and not always in good ways. Morrison agreed wholeheartedly. His company had been burned in the past by partners who hadn't been honest about their situations. Then, 6 weeks into our working relationship, I dropped the bomb. James, I need to tell you something about the Chen development project. We were having lunch at his country club, discussing final details for the marketing campaign. Morrison put down his fork and gave me his full attention. I've been doing some research for the marketing strategy, and I've discovered some things about David's business practices that I think you should know. I handed him a folder containing everything my private investigator had uncovered: financial records showing David's cash flow problems, documentation of corners he'd cut on previous projects, complaints from subcontractors who hadn't been paid on time, evidence of the lies he'd told to secure permits and approvals. Morrison's face grew darker as he read through the documents. "Sarah, this is ... concerning. Why are you bringing this to me?" "Because your company's reputation matters to me now too. We're working together, and if this project fails or creates problems, it reflects on both of us. I couldn't live with myself if I knew about potential issues and didn't warn you." Morrison studied me carefully. "This must be difficult for you. He's your ex, which is exactly why I have to tell you. I know him better than anyone, and I know when he's in over his head. This project is too big for his current situation. He's going to cut corners, make promises he can't keep, and when it all falls apart, Morrison Holdings will be left holding the bag. What do you suggest?" "That's not my decision to make. I just wanted to make sure you had all the information." Morrison Holdings pulled out of the project that afternoon, but I wasn't done with David yet. While Morrison was David's biggest opportunity, it wasn't his only project. Over the next few months, I systematically undermined his professional reputation, not with lies or sabotage, but with truth. I made sure that potential clients knew about his financial instability. I connected with his unpaid subcontractors and helped them understand their legal rights. I alerted city inspectors to projects where he'd cut corners on safety requirements. Every action I took was legal, ethical, and based on factual information. I never lied about David or made false accusations. I simply made sure that people who were considering working with him had access to the truth about who he really was. His business began to crumble. Clients canceled contracts, investors pulled funding, and his reputation in the industry was destroyed. Within 6 months, he was bankrupt. Jessica was easier. Her business depended entirely on personal relationships and referrals. She'd built her client base through networking and word-of-mouth recommendations, but that also made her vulnerable to whisper campaigns and social pressure. I didn't have to destroy Jessica's reputation. I just had to let people know who she really was. It started with my former mutual friends, the ones who'd tried to stay neutral during the divorce. I didn't badmouth Jessica or try to turn them against her. I simply lived my life with grace and dignity while she continued to make choices that revealed her character. Jessica made it easy for me. She flaunted her relationship with David, posting photos on social media of them in restaurants and locations that had special meaning to me. She wore my jewelry, decorated their shared home with gifts I'd given her, and acted like she was the victim when people judged her choices. People talk, especially women, and women don't like other women who steal their friends' husbands. Jessica's business began to suffer as clients quietly chose other designers. Wedding clients especially didn't want to work with someone who destroyed a marriage. Family-owned businesses didn't want to associate their brands with someone who'd betrayed her best friend. Her income dried up. Without David's financial support, which disappeared when his business failed, she couldn't maintain her lifestyle. They had to sell the house they'd been living in and move into a small apartment across town. But the real masterpiece of my revenge was still to come. Act V. The Final Justice. 2 years after I'd discovered David and Jessica in my bed, I was living a life that exceeded my wildest dreams. My career had skyrocketed. I was now VP of marketing for the largest firm in the city, with a salary that was double what I'd made during my marriage. I'd bought a beautiful condo downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline. I was in the best shape of my life, both physically and emotionally. Most importantly, I'd found love again. Marcus was nothing like David. Where David had been charming and superficial, Marcus was thoughtful and genuine. Where David had been focused on appearances, Marcus cared about substance. Where David had betrayed my trust, Marcus earned it every single day through his actions. We'd met at a conference, bonded over our shared passion for ethical business practices, and fell in love slowly, carefully, with the kind of mature consideration that comes from having been burned before. When Marcus proposed with a vintage ring he'd chosen specifically because it was nothing like the flashy diamond David had given me, I said yes with my whole heart. This time, I knew the difference between love and performance, between partnership and possession. Our wedding was small, intimate, perfect. Just our closest friends and family, people who knew our stories and celebrated our happiness without reservation. And Jessica wasn't invited. Actually, Jessica couldn't have come even if she'd been invited, because 3 months before my wedding, she'd been arrested for embezzlement. It turned out that when her design business failed, Jessica had gotten desperate. She'd taken a job at a marketing firm, ironically, one of my competitors, and, when her salary wasn't enough to maintain her lifestyle, she'd started skimming money from client accounts. I had nothing to do with her getting caught. Jessica's greed and desperation did that all on her own. But I may have made sure that when the investigation started, the authorities had access to all the information they needed to build an ironclad case. Jessica was sentenced to 3 years in prison in order to pay full restitution. David, who was struggling to make rent on their small apartment, couldn't afford a good lawyer for her defense. Their relationship didn't survive the stress,